On December 24, 1997, in the quiet suburb of Westfield, just outside Chicago, an entire family vanished into the night. David and Laura Miller, along with their children, Jason and Emily, disappeared without a trace, leaving their home as if they had just stepped out for a moment. Christmas gifts sat wrapped beneath the tree. A beef roast kept cooking in the oven. The dinner table was perfectly set for 4. There were no signs of a struggle, no break-in, no ransom note. For 10 years, this disappearance defied all logic and haunted the residents of Westfield. But in 2007, their retired neighbor, Henry Watson, stumbled upon a discovery that would reveal the most disturbing truth about that Christmas Eve. A truth so unsettling it would forever change how people looked at what could hide behind the walls of an ordinary American home. How could 4 people simply vanish off the face of the earth? And what secrets lay buried beneath the soil of a quiet suburban backyard? Before we uncover this chilling story, let's go back to where it all began. Westfield, Illinois. The late 1990s. The old manufacturing industry was fading, replaced by service sector jobs and suburban expansion. Westfield, once a blue-collar neighborhood, was attracting new middle-class families drawn by affordable homes and proximity to Chicago. For 8 years, the Millers had lived on Maplewood Drive. David Miller, 48, worked as an accountant for a textile supply company on the edge of the city. A meticulous, quiet man, he had slowly climbed the professional ladder, earning the trust of his bosses through his reliability and punctuality. Co-workers described him as dependable, maybe a little too serious, but always willing to help. He wore the same style every day. Gray or brown suits, freshly pressed by his wife, his hair neatly combed back without a strand out of place. Laura, 45, taught at the local elementary school. Parents appreciated her patience, especially with children who struggled academically. She was known for her warm smile, colorful sweaters, and the bake sales she organized every spring to fund school trips. Jason, their 16-year-old son, was a quiet, studious kid. A high school junior with a talent for math and science, he dreamed of becoming an engineer like his uncle. He spent afternoons doing homework or playing soccer at the nearby park with neighborhood kids. Emily, 12 years old, attended the local middle school. Curious and bright, she loved reading and often spent weekends at the public library. She took piano lessons on Wednesdays and told anyone who would listen that she wanted to become a veterinarian. The Millers seemed like the definition of a stable middle-class family. They owned a navy blue Ford Taurus, took summer vacations in Myrtle Beach, and saved diligently for their children's education. Their modest brick house with its green shutters was Laura's pride. She decorated every room herself with handmade curtains and filled the windowsills with thriving plants. Even in Chicago's bitter winters, neighbors described them as kind and private. Henry Watson, 62, lived next door. A retired textile worker, he often chatted with David over the backyard fence. The man never missed a day of work, Henry would later say. 7:30 sharp every morning, out the door with his leather briefcase. Across the street, Mrs. Collins agreed. You couldn't ask for better neighbors. No parties, no arguments, always polite. From the outside, life seemed peaceful. David attended his company's annual holiday dinners. Laura served on the school's parent council. The kids played sports, joined clubs, and brought home good grades. Like any family, they had minor tensions. Jason sometimes clashed with his father's strict rules. Emily didn't like when her parents argued about money. David was more frugal, Laura more willing to spend on the kids. But nothing seemed unusual. By fall of 1997, life grew busier. David's company faced layoffs. Laura struggled with a challenging class of students. Jason prepared for important exams. Emily adjusted to the demands of middle school. Still nothing hinted at what was coming. Christmas shopping was done. The roast beef was ordered from the local butcher. Emily had written one last letter to Santa, hiding it under her pillow even though she was old enough to know better. Jason pretended he didn't care about Christmas anymore, but still helped his mom decorate the tree. December 24th, 1997 began. Like any other day. David woke at 6:30 a.m., showered, dressed in his charcoal gray suit. and joined his family for breakfast: coffee, toast, and Laura's homemade apricot jam. Jason stumbled downstairs, half asleep as usual. Emily chattered excitedly about presents. At 8 a.m., David left for work. The office was closing early for Christmas Eve, but he wanted to finish year-end reports before the holiday. Henry Watson watched from his window as David walked to his car, leather briefcase in hand, scarf tied neatly around his neck. He thought David looked a little tense, but it was the end of the quarter. Maybe it was just work stress. Laura walked the kids to the bus stop, wearing her burgundy coat and black leather boots, holding Emily's hand while Jason kept a few steps ahead, eager to look independent. Mrs. Collins waved from across the street, wishing them a Merry Christmas. Everything about that morning seemed perfectly normal. At noon, David wrapped up work, said goodbye to his colleagues, and accepted his holiday bonus envelope from his boss. Some noticed he seemed quieter than usual. No one thought much of it. Jason finished school early, joking with classmates and exchanging shy holiday wishes with a girl he liked. Emily rode home with friends, giggling about Christmas morning. It was the last time anyone in Westfield saw the Miller family alive. That Christmas Eve afternoon, Emily joined the small holiday party her teacher, Mrs. Durham, had organized for the class. She passed out the chocolates her mother had made and sang Christmas carols with the same enthusiasm she'd shown all month. Her teacher later recalled that Emily seemed especially cheerful that day, chattier than usual, excitedly sharing stories about her family's holiday traditions. By mid-afternoon, the Millers gathered at home for the final preparations. Laura worked in the kitchen, peeling vegetables and stirring sauces while the smell of cinnamon and orange cookies filled the air. David carefully set the dining table with the good dishes, Laura's mother's floral china reserved only for special occasions. Jason climbed into the attic to bring down the last of the decorations, hanging garlands across the living room ceiling. Emily arranged the figures of the family's nativity scene on the sideboard with the precision of a museum curator, gently placing each character in its spot. Around 3 p.m., Laura drove to the local butcher shop to pick up the roast she had ordered days before. The butcher, Mr. Lawrence, remembered her clearly. A 5-1 2-pound beef roast, one of his best cuts, meant for a family Christmas dinner. He recalled Laura being slightly tense but smiling politely, like most of his customers on that hectic holiday afternoon. Throughout the day, neighbors noticed unusual activity around the Miller house. Henry Watson from next door saw David making several trips between the house and the garage, carrying boxes and bags. He assumed they were last-minute gifts or holiday supplies. Across the street, Mrs. Collins spotted Laura vigorously shaking out rugs on the front porch, a little unusual for Christmas Eve, but she chalked it up to Laura's well-known perfectionism. By 5 p.m., as darkness settled early over Westfield on that winter solstice evening, things inside the Miller house seemed to slow down. Lights came on in every room, casting a warm glow across the yard, a cozy, holiday feeling typical of Christmas Eve. By 6:30 p.m., Mrs. Collins noted something odd. Every light in the house was still blazing, even upstairs in the kids' bedrooms. The Millers usually didn't waste electricity, but she figured Christmas excitement was an exception. Their blue Ford Taurus sat parked neatly in the driveway, as always. By 8 p.m., Henry returned from a quick trip to the corner store. The house was still lit up, but strangely silent. No music, no laughter, no sounds of celebration drifting through the cold December air. He found it odd, but didn't want to intrude on what he assumed was a private family evening. It wasn't until the next morning, Christmas Day, around 9 a.m., that Henry grew truly concerned. No lights on, no movement, no sounds of kids tearing open presents. The house was completely still. At 10 a.m., uneasy now, Henry walked over and rang the doorbell. No answer. He rang again. Nothing. Finally, he knocked hard on the door. Silence. Circling the house, he peered through the windows and froze. The dining table was still set for 4. The roast in the oven had burned to a blackened husk, the oven still humming after running all night. Christmas gifts sat unopened under the tree. But the Millers were gone. The police investigation revealed a scene locked in time, Detective Michael Carter, head of the case, found no signs of forced entry. No struggle, no missing valuables. The doors were locked from the inside. The family's wallets and IDs sat undisturbed by the front door. Their winter coats hung neatly in the closet, untouched, even though temperatures outside hovered near freezing. In the weeks that followed, the quiet suburban street transformed into the center of a growing mystery. Police canvassed the neighborhood repeatedly, questioning every resident, every shopkeeper, anyone who might have spoken to the family. Henry, shaken by what he'd found, developed a near-obsessive routine. Every morning, he sat by his window, watching the empty house as though expecting the Millers to return. He kept a notebook, recording any movement, any noise, any visitor, as if gathering evidence himself. His daughter, Catherine, began visiting more often, worried about his mental state. Mrs. Collins reacted differently. A widow for 5 years, she found herself becoming the unofficial source of neighborhood updates, sharing every rumor, every theory, every new development with curious neighbors and reporters alike. Her living room became a gathering spot for speculation, a role she embraced with a mixture of pride and guilt. At David's workplace, the timing of the disappearance complicated matters. His textile supply company was already facing layoffs, and now the press swarmed their offices. David's boss admitted to investigators that David had seemed distracted in recent weeks, but blamed it on job insecurity. A forensic audit revealed no financial wrongdoing, no missing funds, no suspicious accounts. At Laura's elementary school, the mood turned somber. Parents began questioning teachers, wondering if anyone had noticed trouble at home. Mrs. Durham, Emily's teacher, developed a nagging sense of guilt, replaying her last conversations with the little girl, searching for clues she might have missed. At Westfield High, Jason's classmates were stunned. Sophie Miller, the girl he'd quietly liked, developed anxiety and had to attend counseling. The school arranged group therapy sessions for affected students, but the unease lingered for years. David's mother, Margaret Miller, 74 and living in Wisconsin, refused to believe her son had abandoned his family. She showed detectives the letters she'd exchanged with Emily. Letters full of excitement about Christmas, about school projects, about the future. The last one arrived on December 20th, just days before the disappearance. Financial records revealed nothing unusual. The Millers were careful but comfortable. A mortgage, some savings, no major debts, no life insurance policies suggesting financial motive. Speculation in the neighborhood grew wild. Some whispered about a planned disappearance, maybe fleeing debts or threats no one knew about. Others suspected kidnapping, even though no ransom demand ever came. A few imagined witness protection programs or secret criminal ties. By January 1998, the local paper, the Westfield Gazette, ran multiple articles calling it the Christmas Eve mystery. Regional TV stations aired reports, interviewing neighbors and police, but no new evidence surfaced. Months turned into years. By the early 2000s, the case of the Miller family slowly joined the ranks of Westfield's unsolved cold cases. The case file, now several hundred pages thick, kept growing with occasional new witness statements, but hopes of finding the Miller family alive faded with each passing year. Detective Michael Carter, who had led the original investigation, was reassigned to Detroit in 2001. With frustration, he handed the case to his successor, calling it the most baffling mystery of his career. Next door, Henry Watson grew old under the shadow of the disappearance. Retirement, which he had once imagined would be spent gardening and visiting his grandchildren, instead became consumed by the unanswered questions of what happened to his neighbors. Henry turned into an amateur expert on missing persons cases. He clipped every newspaper article, corresponded with families of other missing people, and became the living memory of the Miller case. His family worried about his obsession, but for Henry, it was the only way to cope with the trauma of what he had found that cold Christmas morning. In 2002, after 5 long years, the Miller home was finally put up for sale by the county, following the legal process for declaring the family missing. A young couple bought the house at a price far below market value because of its reputation. They renovated it, painted walls, replaced floors, hoping to erase the heaviness that seemed to cling to the place. But less than a year later, unable to bear living under the weight of the unsolved mystery, they sold it at a loss and moved away. Spring of 2007 brought the first real change in a decade. Now 72, Henry decided to finally tackle the overgrown corner of his backyard, an area filled with brambles and weeds that had sat untouched for decades along the fence he shared with the former Miller property. His daughter Catherine encouraged him, worried about his health but glad he was focusing on something other than the past. On a sunny May morning, Henry put on his gardening gloves, grabbed his old spade, and began clearing the area for the vegetable garden he had always dreamed of planting. The work was hard for his arthritic hands, but he kept going, determined. Around 11 a.m., while tearing out a stubborn tangle of roots, his spade struck something solid. At first, Henry thought it was a buried stone, or maybe a piece of junk left by previous owners. He dug carefully around it. Then his heart jolted. It was a rectangular object wrapped in thick black plastic, buried about 16 inches deep. Henry, whose obsession with the case had sharpened his instincts over the years, instantly understood the potential importance of what he had uncovered. His hands trembled as he lifted the heavy, dirt-caked bundle from the ground. The plastic trash bag had held up remarkably well over the years, protecting whatever was inside from moisture and decay. Henry didn't open it. Instead, he ran inside, called the Westfield Police Department, and told them what he had found. Even after 10 years, the words Miller family still triggered immediate response. Within an hour, police cars and a forensic team swarmed Henry's backyard, taping off the area. Lieutenant Sylvia Monroe, who had taken over the case in 2003, personally supervised the scene. She knew the Miller file inside and out, and had always believed they hadn't just vanished into thin air. Maybe finally, this was the breakthrough she had waited for. The bag was opened under strict chain of custody procedures at the forensic lab, with a county judge present. Inside was a large manila envelope containing typed documents, photographs, and a handwritten confession signed by David Miller himself. The documents were astonishingly well preserved. The confession was dated December 23, 1997, just one day before the family disappeared. Handwriting experts confirmed it. Matched David Miller's writing from work documents in the original case file. The contents stunned investigators. David admitted he had been the target of blackmail for months. Someone at his company had discovered a serious accounting error he had made in 1996, an error involving $25,000 during a complex corporate restructuring. David described in detail how it happened. In October 1996, while handling financial records for the merger of two subsidiaries, he had failed to record a reimbursement from a supplier during a frantic end-of-quarter rush. The unrecorded amount left a hidden discrepancy that only a deep audit could uncover. The blackmailer was identified in the letter, Philip Martin, the company's external auditor. Martin had found the error during a routine review in September 1997. Instead of reporting it, he had confronted David privately in the company parking lot, hinting at opportunities if David cooperated, and consequences if he didn't. But Martin didn't want money directly. He wanted David to falsify financial documents to hide the company's true financial state, enabling Martin and his associates to buy controlling shares at a fraction of their value before a planned corporate restructuring. Refusal would mean exposure, accusations of embezzlement, and prison. Compliance would make David complicit in corporate fraud. The letter described David's growing panic in the final months of 1997. He had even consulted a business attorney in Chicago in November, hypothetically asking about irregularities in accounting law. The attorney confirmed to police in 2007 that David never returned after that first visit, likely too afraid of what might happen if the blackmail became public. By December, Martin had set a final deadline. Cooperate by December 31st, or everything would be exposed. The letter revealed David's mental state spiraling under the weight of fear, shame, and isolation. He admitted he considered quitting his job, moving his family away, even confessing to Laura. But every option seemed like the destruction of the life he had built. The idea that his children might one day read in the paper that their father had been arrested for theft was unbearable to him. The envelope also contained photographs, grainy images clearly taken without David's knowledge. They showed him in restaurants and bars with Martin and other businessmen, creating the illusion of criminal meetings. Investigators realized Martin had been building a case to destroy David if he resisted. The 2007 investigation into Philip Martin revealed a man with a polished resume and a corrupt empire behind it. A graduate of a prestigious business school, Martin had made a career of exploiting struggling companies, using intimidation, fraud, and hidden partnerships with investors across Illinois and neighboring states. No one had realized how ruthless his methods truly were, until now, and David Miller, meticulous accountant, devoted husband and father, had been cornered by him in the final weeks of 1997. Phone records recovered in 2007 through court orders revealed multiple calls in the week before Christmas 1997 between the Miller home and Philip Martin's accounting firm. Each call lasted only a few minutes, but coincided precisely with the period when Martin was tightening his grip on David Miller. Witnesses re-interviewed in 2007 now remembered Laura Miller appearing unusually tense in those final days, distracted, in a way that seemed to go far beyond normal holiday stress. The most unsettling detail came from Emily's teacher, Mrs. Durham, who recalled that Emily had told her, just before Christmas break, that Mom and Dad talk in whispers at night. At the time, no one thought much of it. Now it was clear David had finally confided in his wife about the blackmail and the danger pressing in on them. Bank records, examined again in light of the confession, revealed strange activity in the days before Christmas Eve. On December 22nd, David withdrew $5,000 in cash, far more than he had ever taken out at once. He used 3 different ATMs around Westfield, as though trying to avoid drawing attention. That same day, Laura emptied her small personal savings account, adding another $3,000. When investigators combined this financial evidence with neighbors' reports of David making repeated trips to the garage on December 24th, the picture became clearer. The Millers were preparing to run. But could an ordinary law-abiding family really vanish into thin air? Psychologists brought in during the 2007 review concluded that David, a meticulous but inexperienced man, likely underestimated how impossible disappearing would be in reality. False identities, housing, schooling for the kids, long-term survival. Without a paper trail, he was in far over his head. The confession revealed David feared more than exposure. He mentioned seeing a strange car parked on the street repeatedly in early December, convinced Martin's associates were watching the Lam family. Whether real or imagined, that fear pushed him toward desperate decisions. The most heartbreaking part of David's letter was about his children. He wrote of lying to Jason and Emily, inventing excuses for his nervousness, hiding everything to protect them. He couldn't bear the thought of them knowing their father was cornered, terrified, and possibly ruined. But the letter ended abruptly, just as David began to describe a meeting at 8 o'clock tonight that will decide everything. The writing stopped mid-sentence, his hand visibly shaking in the final lines. No location, no details, and no explanation of what happened next. The discovery reignited the investigation like nothing since 1997. Lieutenant Sylvia Monroe assembled a new task force with full authority to pursue leads, focusing squarely on Philip Martin. By Q. 2007, Martin was 53, living openly under his real name, running a successful financial consulting firm, married with 2 children. Outwardly respectable, no sign of scandal, but police surveillance hinted at a man still careful, still guarded, a man who might have buried his past along with the Millers. Forensic analysis of the envelope found in Henry Watson's yard uncovered partial fingerprints not matching anyone in the Miller family or police records. Someone else had handled the confession after David wrote it, someone who then buried it. Digital forensics went further. By examining old company servers, investigators confirmed that the accounting error David described had indeed been quietly corrected in January 1998 by Philip Martin himself. The timing was damning. Weeks after the family vanished, the problem disappeared from the books too. On May 28, 2007, Philip Martin was summoned for questioning. He arrived with a high-profile corporate attorney, calm, confident, dismissing everything in David's letter as the paranoid fantasy of a stressed employee unraveling under pressure. Martin even produced co-workers willing to say David seemed anxious and withdrawn in December 1997, as though his mental state, not Martin's blackmail, explained everything, but investigators had prepared carefully. When shown the photographs from the envelope, the ones Martin claimed didn't exist, his composure cracked. He admitted meeting David privately several times, but insisted they were harmless business conversations, nothing more. Detectives pressed harder. An old paper calendar from Martin's former assistant revealed handwritten notes confirming late-night meetings with David, dates matching David's letter exactly. Even more telling, those entries had been deleted from the firm's digital records, but survived on paper archives nobody thought still existed. The breakthrough came when investigators tracked down Andre Beaumont, a former associate of Martin's involved in his shady acquisitions. Beaumont, 68 and dying of cancer, agreed to talk in exchange for immunity. His testimony shattered. The case open. He described a network of corporate extortions across Illinois. Martin's specialty: find accounting errors, threaten exposure, force cooperation for hostile takeovers. David Miller was one victim among many. But what Beaumont revealed next stunned detectives. On Christmas Eve 1997, Martin had arranged a final meeting with David, supposedly to settle things so the Millers could enjoy Christmas in peace. The meeting place, a shuttered warehouse in an industrial park outside Joliet, owned by one of Martin's shell companies. Beaumont admitted he was there that night, with Martin and 2 other men, both now deceased. He said the plan was to scare David into full cooperation. Nothing more. But David brought his entire family. Probably, Beaumont said, because he thought having his wife and kids there would keep things calm. He thought no one would hurt him in front of them. That mistake would decide everything. The confrontation spiraled into tragedy when Laura Miller tried to call 911 on her cell phone. According to Andre Beaumont's testimony, one of Martin's men, Eric Lemoyne, a violent, impulsive figure, lunged to stop her. In the chaos, Laura fell, striking, her head on the sharp edge of a metal beam. The injury was catastrophic, likely fatal. What had begun as a plan to intimidate David Miller into compliance now turned into a nightmare. Seeing Laura on the ground, bleeding, Martin made a cold calculation. David, Jason, and Emily had witnessed everything. If they walked away alive, the entire blackmail operation, and Martin himself, would be exposed. Beaumont admitted his own cowardice, saying he froze as Martin ordered the others to handle it. He knew what was coming, but claimed he didn't have the courage to intervene. What happened next horrified even veteran investigators in 2007. Beaumont revealed the bodies were destroyed in an industrial acid vat inside the warehouse. A.E. method Martin had allegedly used before to erase evidence in other crimes. That single detail explained why no trace of the Millers was ever found, despite years of searching. On June 6, 2007, Philip Martin was arrested at his Chicago office in front of stunned employees and clients. The man who had lived for a decade as a respectable businessman, husband, and father now faced charges of kidnapping, murder, and corporate fraud. Under the weight of Beaumont's testimony, forensic evidence, and financial records, Martin finally confessed. But his confession revealed a chilling mindset. He described Laura's death as an unfortunate accident, and the killing of David and the children as a necessary step to protect himself and his partners. No remorse. No humanity. For 10 years, Martin had lived a normal life, concealing a crime so cold-blooded that even seasoned detectives admitted it haunted them. The investigation uncovered the staggering scale of Martin's crimes. Between 1995 and 2005, his network extorted at least 23 companies across Illinois and neighboring states, stealing millions through fraud, blackmail, and intimidation. 3 other accountants admitted under oath that they too had been threatened by Martin's operation, but paid quietly to protect their reputations and families. The trial began on October 15, 2008, at the Cook County Courthouse in Chicago. It became a national sensation. Victims' families, represented by attorney Catherine Bernard, demanded justice for what she called the calculated destruction of innocent lives. David's mother, Margaret Miller, then 85, testified with heartbreaking dignity, speaking of her son's devotion to his family and the bright futures stolen from Jason and Emily. Henry Watson, the neighbor whose discovery had unraveled the mystery, gave one of the most emotional testimonies. He revealed that for 10 years, he had kept Emily's old school backpack in his house, refusing to throw it away, hoping one day she might return to claim it. Psychiatric experts who evaluated Martin confirmed what investigators suspected: psychopathy, total absence of empathy, exceptional ability to manipulate others, a personality split between outward respectability and hidden cruelty. During a court-ordered reconstruction at the old warehouse, Martin shocked onlookers with his detached demeanor. He described the killings, in technical detail, as though recounting a business transaction rather than a family's final moments. On November 28, 2008, the jury returned its verdict: life imprisonment without parole for Philip Martin. Beaumont, because of his cooperation and terminal illness, received a suspended 8-year sentence. The ruling sent shockwaves through legal and law enforcement communities. The Miller case, as it became known, was soon taught in police academies across the country as a landmark investigation in persistence, forensic innovation, and corporate crime. For Henry Watson, the verdict finally brought peace. He transformed his backyard garden, the same place where he found David's confession, into a memorial, planting 4 white rose bushes for David, Laura, Jason, and Emily. Neighbors followed his example, creating a quiet space of remembrance on Maplewood Drive where the tragedy once cast its darkest shadow. The Miller house itself, purchased by the city after the trial, was converted into a counseling center for victims of extortion and blackmail, a lasting tribute to the family whose lives had been stolen by greed and fear. Mrs. Collins, now elderly, often spoke to visitors about how the mystery's resolution finally allowed the neighborhood to heal. She kept a framed photo of the Miller family from a 1997 school fundraiser, smiling, unaware of what was coming, on her living room wall. The trial revealed other victims too: small business owners bankrupted by Martin's schemes, families destroyed by suicide and depression. Their testimonies showed the far-reaching damage of one man's ambition. David's incomplete confession became a key teaching document for psychologists studying victims of corporate blackmail, an intimate window into fear, isolation, and desperation. Margaret Miller passed away in 2011 at the age of 88, remembered by neighbors and investigators alike as a woman of remarkable strength who lived long enough to see justice for her family. At her funeral, Henry, now in his 80s, spoke for the entire community, honoring the lives lost and the investigators who refused to give up. The Miller case remains a sobering reminder of how a single accounting error, exploited by a ruthless predator, spiraled into one of Illinois' darkest criminal tragedies. It shows the importance of reporting blackmail early, the need for corporate accountability, and the unwavering determination of law enforcement to seek justice, even after a decade of silence. And it leaves behind a legacy of lessons, courage, and remembrance for David, Laura, Jason, and Emily Miller, whose story began as a mystery and ended as a call to protect the vulnerable from those who would exploit fear for power.